Hey there, friends. Noisy bird. Hey there, friends. I just really wanted to share some thoughts and some things that I've been meditating on in the last few days to do with what's going on in the world and particularly the challenge. I think that one of the biggest challenges that is really in the church at the moment, and that is the challenge of acceptance in the church when there are divergent views of things. And the devil would love to bring division and to bring strife and disunity and disharmony, and yet God calls us to be at peace with one another. And I want to offer some reflections just from looking at Romans chapter 14 and 15. And just before I get into the passage itself, I want to just highlight again that we are in this together. That this lockdown has a way of separating us, and yet we are actually in this together, and we need to continue to remember that, to continue to reach out to one another, and to be mindful of each other, and actually thinking about others in this time. None of us likes the threat of sickness or disease hanging over us or our families. None of us likes to be coerced or have our jobs threatened or any other kind of threats leveled at us. No one enjoys feeling like they're being deceived, or that they don't know what's going on, or things are being hidden. And no one enjoys enforced lockdowns and social isolation and restrictions. And so just to remember that we are actually in this together, and that togetherness as an attitude of our hearts must be a high priority for us at the moment, more so than being right or correct, is to be loving. And so I think we just sometimes need to refocus on that. For many people, togetherness and a view towards community is actually their reason to accept vaccination and just to go along with what's being recommended, either to reduce the threat of sickness or death to others, or to end the lockdowns, or to be able to see their friends and families again. For many, that's the reason that, to go ahead and just do these things. For others, there are many who don't feel that vaccination is safe for whatever reason. Well, those people still need and seek solidarity and belonging and community, and we should never lose sight of that we all need community, and God has called us together into community as his people, and also to create community in our city, in our towns and streets. I just wanted to look at Romans chapter 14, because I think what happens here in this passage is that we actually are given a roadmap for what it looks like to actually find acceptance and unity and love, even when there are divergent views within the Christian community. And I know that the same kind of divergent views are actually reflected in our surrounding community. So if we can get this right, we can actually model what it looks like, a Christ-like approach to this together. So what we find in Romans 14 is that Paul picks up on a couple of issues that were creating division in the church in Rome. So I'll just read out the first little part of the passage. I think if you want to read it and meditate on it yourself, it's kind of like goes all through chapter 14 and the first half of chapter 15, but we'll just read the first bit. Accept the one whose faith is weak, without quarrelling over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another, whose faith is weak, eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord. If we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Sounds kind of macabre, doesn't it? And yet Paul doesn't fear death. It's not part of his equation. He's just saying whatever happens, it's for the Lord. And so I'll stop there with the reading, but he continues to unpack what this looks like. But the two things I'll pick up on. Firstly, the issue of eating meat or not. In the society where in Rome, meat was not slaughtered using kosher methods. So for those who were wanting to observe, their Jewish traditions and the Torah, even though they were Christians, clearly they couldn't trust that the meat was clean in kosher terms. On top of that, it was very likely to have been blessed in some way by a pagan deity or a pagan priest, whatever, as part of the process. Now, Paul, elsewhere in Corinthians, there's a similar discussion, and he says, eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Now, clearly, part of the group of believers in Rome understood this, and they were like, I'm just going to eat it. It's just meat. It comes from God. It doesn't come from those other, pagan gods. The idol has no power. And yet for some of them, clearly it was kind of an issue of like, how can you put that in your body? Like, it's been offered to idols. It's been tainted by demonic stuff. How can you do that? And it was a big issue, to the degree where it was causing division in the church. And Paul doesn't resolve it for them other than to say, you've got to accept each other on the basis of faith, not rules, not obedience to one particular understanding. The second issue that he raises is sacred days. I think it's interesting here that he doesn't say Sabbath. He leaves the argument open enough for us to understand that there's a principle at work here that goes beyond just the keeping of Sabbath, beyond just obedience to the Jewish law or Torah. It's much more about acceptance of one another with our differences of interpretation that represent personal faith. And this is what was happening as we had a situation where within the church there were people who were interpreting what faith looks like differently. And Paul doesn't say one's wrong and one's right. The labels strong and weak is something we need to grapple with. We're called to live by faith, not by rules and regulations. And that's important because what Paul allows for here is that personal faith can actually come up with a different answer. And he presents us with a tension, and he doesn't resolve it. He says, being convinced in your own mind, whichever way. But he's also saying, but you must accept the other. And I find this fascinating, and I find it very relevant to our situation right now. Being unwavering in my faith and I can have a conviction about what is right for me before God, and yet actually understand that someone else, out of good motivation and out of wanting to follow God faithfully, can come to a different conclusion. And our call is to accept one another. What he does is he gives them a way of growing together that depends on love and grace, not on conformity and right knowledge or information. So reflecting on that for us now, I can actually see how people can have quite different convictions about something like vaccination or civil responsibility, and could actually see themselves being strong in faith, actually wear that label and say, well, I'm strong because I'm convinced that this is a right faith response, and yet be quite different in their conclusions. So trusting God and loving people in the realm of faith can actually look different for you than it does for me. And we're actually called to accepting one another. That's the prime message of this passage, to accept one another. Now, we might also potentially feel weak in our faith. It's okay to admit that. You might wrestle against fear and confusion. You may not actually be really certain what to do about this. And, we sometimes call people a fence sitter, but if you're not convinced in your own mind, then it's okay. But God is able to make you strong. God is able to give you peace and give you a way forward. And we need to support one another in that. It's important to recognize where our concerns come from, whether it's coming from fear, either fear of sickness or fear of government, or fear of what other people think, what they might think, because I know they are convinced this way, but I'm leaning the other way, but I'm holding back because of fear. We need to test our information sources. If you're someone who loves doing the researching, then I encourage you to read widely, use critical thinking and discernment. That is, put everything to the test of whether it is credible. And there's a lot of stuff. I get sent quite a few things, most of which I actually do take the time to read, and there's a lot of it that's not all that credible. Neither should we blindly think that just because it's on a government website it's credible. I think we need to use wisdom in these things. But here's the thing, God does not require you or me to be a research analyst or a medical expert. He requires us to listen to his voice. That is faith. And we are responsible towards one another insofar as we demonstrate love. So this passage goes on as you read through some of the key phrases that Paul talks about. What does our response really look like? To not pass judgment on one another, or to bring any sense of condemnation or make life harder for someone. Make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification, so we can encourage someone, to act in love towards others. He even says to know when to hold our tongue. There is a time when we need to just shush, even if we've got a different conviction. He says, verse 22, so whatever you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. There is a time for that. Jesus said to us, I am the good shepherd. That means he's able to watch over you. He's able to keep you and protect you. Okay, even from, now sheep can do dumb things, right? He's able to protect me from my own stupidity. God is good at that. He says, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. So I encourage you, listen to him for yourself and accept one another. Do what leads to peace, to encouragement, to building up, and let everything else go. Thanks, guys. I look forward to seeing you soon.